Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Been a long time since we chatted for Deliver Us from Evil.
Oh boy, that was a while ago.
And boy, you've only gotten better since then, let me tell you.
Thank you.
The Black Phone, I'm so glad I'm getting you on this go-round since I didn't get you for theatrical release. This is an amazing film from a storytelling standpoint and then from the visual design and construct of the film. This has so much heart that is driven by the characters of Finn and Gwen and the performances from Mason and Madeline. Just absolute perfection. And this is not what you expect in a quote-unquote horror film. It's period perfect with the 70s. You've got a story that is essentially non-graphic for the most part. You bring in supernatural elements, but everything is grounded in reality. And it's very believable. That's one of the great strengths here, and I think it comes from that dynamic and the relationship between Finn and Gwen. Just so well done, Scott.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all that.
How challenging was it for you and Cargill to, first of all, get this down on paper before you even broached the cinematic aspect of this? Because you do have so many elements here, and you're walking that fine line, because you could very easily have pushed this over the edge into gruesome and grotesque, but you didn't.
But we didn't. Yeah, it was the writing of it was something that took a long time to get to. You know, I had read Joe Hill's short story 18 years ago when it was first published, and I gave it to Cargill when we first started working together, and I said, I think this is a great idea for a horror movie, and we could just never figure out how to do it, because it's a really short story, needed a lot of expansion. And then, when I stepped off of Doctor Strange 2, I'd been in therapy for a couple of years already, and I'd been dealing almost exclusively with the trauma and the violence of my own childhood. I grew up in a very violent home and violent neighborhood and working class North Denver area that I had never seen put on film. And at first, what I told Cargill, I said, I'm interested in maybe trying to take all this stuff that I've been, dealing with and trying to make like an American 400 Blows, the biographical film that Francis Truffaut made about his childhood in France. And then I thought my story's too boring for that. There's nothing that's interesting enough. But then the big idea was, hey, what if I took my childhood memories and the neighborhood and the violent kids that I knew and all that, and the bullying and all of my experience as a kid, and combine it with Joe's short story. And when I said that to Cargill, he was like, that's it. He immediately got it. And once we had the idea of putting those two things together, and it was very easy to write. It only took us 6 weeks to finish it.
Wow.
The heart that you're talking about starts with Joe's story. What I liked about Joe's story was that it was such a good, scary idea, but it was really told from the point of view of love. There's so much empathy for the two child characters in the short story. There's a real inspirational quality to it by the time you finish reading it, and I wanted to really preserve that and try, and also just where I was in my own life after going through a lot the last 5 years, I felt ready to write something with a more uplifting ending.
Mm-hmm. The ending of this film is just absolutely fabulous, but it is the driving force throughout it is that connection, that connective tissue, and the love between Finn and Gwen. But also something that you do that really plays out if people are watching and paying attention is the fact that people may think Finn, he gets bullied, he gets beat up upon, but he's a member of the science club. He thinks. He's a very smart boy, just like Gwen is wise beyond her years, thanks to the gift that she has of second sight. Was that important to you to incorporate? Because now more than ever, pushing the sciences in school and making that a focus is so important, just as it was in this time period back in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, that was very important for Finn's character. You know, I like the idea that he's not like a typical nerd.
Right.
But he is good at math enough to help his friend Robin. You know, and he loves the Apollo program. He's got Estes rockets all over his room, and for fun on the weekends, that's what he does. He goes and fires off these rockets. He's fascinated by that world and that technology. I think that portraying kind of normal kid who's good in school and enjoys these subjects is a great character, and it's not an archetypical character, because usually if you have a kid who's into these things, he's just very antisocial and very nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
And Finn's not that. He's just kind of a little bit of a loner. That's all.
I love that aspect of the character, and that you brought that through, especially with your production design, which I have to say, Patty Podesta did an amazing job with the period perfection of the production design, right down to the Corningware coffee pots and the coffee cups. Just stupendous. You really you immersed us right there in that time, and you carry that through with your cinematographer, with Brett.
Yeah.
How did the two of you come up with the visual tonal bandwidth here? Because it's so important for the period. And
well, it was about what the target was. You know, what I said to Brett and Patty both was, what I don't want is I don't want to fetishize the 70s. I don't want people to notice any one thing and go, oh gosh, I remember those socks, or oh yeah, I don't want to see anything that's like the typical thing from that era that makes people, laugh and be pulled out of the movie because they're looking at something that was so iconically 70s. I said, what I want is I want it to feel like North Denver in 1978.
Mm-hmm.
In order for it to just feel like you're there, like it's real, every little detail needs to be just exactly right, so that you're not spending time, pushing one particular object or one particular kind of fashion or one outfit. Instead, every little bit of it just adds to the overall vibe. It was much more important for me for the movie to feel like the 70s than for there to be anything memorable about the 70s in the movie. And that's a very different approach than what you usually get.
Mm-hmm.
More nostalgic movies looking back on the 70s or 80s.
I felt I was reliving part of my life with everything, with the diffusion of the light, with the production design. It was as if it was authentic to the core.
Yeah.
So
we worked hard to get that effect, and I do think that Patty and Brett did this stupendous job in helping to realize that.
How challenging was the editing of this film? You have a killer editor. I know you've worked with Frederick before. With his work, going back to Taken, a very similar kind of whole abduction concept, but his editing is always so tight and it builds. And once again, an excellent job with the editing. So I'm curious about how challenging it was to find the pace, especially when we get into the basement segments with Finn and the phone calls. I love how you guys shot that, but I love how you paced it and cut it with the editing process.
Well, most of the pacing, especially in the basement, is not in the editing. Most of it's in the camera work.
Wow.
Most of those shots on the phone are single shots. The scene with Robin Ariano at the end when he calls, that entire phone call, which is 3 or 4 minutes long, is one shot. And so the key was to get the pacing right on set. There's definitely editorial control for the pacing between the conversations between Finney and Ethan, between Finney and the grabber, because they're always shot in separations because they keep their distance from each other. So Fred did a great job with that. Fred's real, I think, talent comes from two things. One, he's the greatest editor I know in terms of the way he can manipulate images. What he did with the Super 8 pumps, for example, was brilliant. But the best thing about Fred as an editor is that he has all this skill, technical skill. He's a great action editor. He can cut, that kind of stuff as well as anybody else. But wait, what makes him really special is this: more than any other editor I've ever met, Fred cuts from character. The first thing he does is he spends an unusual amount of time getting to know all the footage, so he knows everything, so that he can focus first and foremost and do all of the editing from the point of view of who are these characters. And Ethan, for example, Ethan did various versions of takes through the whole movie. Every time I would do a shot of him, he would usually do 2 or 3 versions of the line.
Wow.
And when I saw the editor's cut, Fred had carved out such a perfect performance for Ethan based on all that footage. I never asked to go back and look at more of that footage. I saw it and I was like, that's the grabber, And I just trusted Fred. I knew I could go back and do it, but that I would end up seeing that he already made the best decisions. And it's that relentless character first attitude that Fred has that makes him so remarkable.
Ethan is chilling. As the grabber, he is chilling, and not just in his performance and his vocal intonations, but with the masks that you have designed. How did you come up with the various masks and the different looks for them? I love that they're piecemeal. But for, I think, the first one that we see, they're piecemeal. So there can be a top, there can be a bottom. You can take the top part off, you could take the bottom. It's really fascinating, but each is so distinctive. I'm curious where you got the idea for each of these designs.
Well, that idea just was my own original idea. In the script, I just had written that it was an antique leather mask, that one was a double smile and one was a double frown. And then after I cast Ethan and started to get ready to prepare the movie, I realized I have to make an iconic horror mask. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about it. How do you make a new iconic horror mask? And then I came up with the idea of, well, what if he has 3 instead of just 2? And then came the idea, what if each of them could be split in half so he could wear just the top half or the bottom half? It was just an original idea that really worked. And once I had that idea, I gave that idea to Tom Savini, the great Tom Savini, who's designed some of the great horror masks in film history. And he was the one who drew, the faces of the mask, the smile and the frown and the mouthless mask. And as soon as I saw his sketches with them all split in half, I was like, that's it. That's what we're making.
Because each one is fabulous. I'm mesmerized. I've watched the film 3 times now. And each time I see more and more detail in each of the masks as a whole and as a piece.
That was. I mean, I spent more time in pre-production getting the details of the mask right. I spent more time on that than anything else. I probably kicked back 25 or 30 versions of the mask because the texture wasn't right, or the color wasn't right, or the aging wasn't right. I really had an idea of exactly what it needed to be, but it was very hard to realize, but we finally got there, and the masks I think are iconic.
Well, I thank you for all the time you spent on the masks, Scott, because I'm in love with them. I have to ask you, what is the magic between the collaboration of you and Jason as a producer and a director?
I mean, it's always been ultimately Jason's confidence in me and empowerment and protection of me. Everything I've ever done with Jason, just gives me complete control. I literally he gave me final cut on Sinister. I might as well have had final cut on Black Phone, because anything that I wanted to do, he supported. And it's just an unqualified support. But also, over the years, I've just become really close to Jason. He's my closest friend in this business. He and I know a lot of things about each other personally, and share a lot with each other about our lives. And so it's just a relationship of absolute trust on every level. And that's a hard thing to find in Hollywood, to become that good of friends with the person who's but also your financier and producer.
Mm-hmm. The big question here, Scott, Danny Partridge or Potsy Weber?
Oh man, I say Potsy. I think Potsy was secretly cool. I think in a lot of ways Potsy's cooler than the Bond.
That you had me laughing. Opening of the film, that the first act, and we get that posited question, and I was laughing. I just loved that, loved it. But I agree with you.
Yeah, Potsy was the token nerd on the show, but in retrospect, I think Potsy was actually pretty cool. It's like Ginger or Marianne. Like most guys are going to say Marianne, even though Ginger was supposedly the sexy one.
And I have to say that much of Finn really is Potsy. Seems like a little nerdy, but he's got that heart and kindness.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like that. That's nice. That works for me.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much. This has been great getting to chat with you about this one, and I hope we get to do it again sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.